Picture this for a moment. You're 70 years old. You've worked your entire life, raised children, paid bills, always did what was right. But now, at the end of your life, you find yourself broke, hopeless, staring at a future that seems impossible to sustain. This is the brutal reality for millions of elderly people around the world. But today, I'm going to tell you stories that will give you chills and show you that even in the most desperate situations, miracles still happen. What you're about to discover will completely change your perspective on aging, dignity, and the transformative power of human solidarity. Get ready to meet couples who, when everything seemed lost, found light where there was only darkness. First, I want to introduce you to Mary and John, 72 and 75 years old, respectively. After 50 years of marriage, they found themselves evicted from their home at 72 years old, with no close family, no financial reserves, literally sleeping on the streets. Mary cried every night, not from hunger or cold, but from the shame of having reached that point. John, too proud to ask for help, watched his wife waste away day after day. It was November, winter was approaching, and they knew they might not survive. But then, something extraordinary happened. A young businessman, driving by, saw the couple sharing a piece of bread. Something deeply touched his heart. He didn't just help them in that moment. He created a project that changed their lives forever. Within 6 months, Mary and John not only had a home, but became ambassadors for a national movement supporting the elderly. The miracle didn't come from heaven. It came from the heart of someone who decided to take action. Now follow me to the outskirts of a major city, where Rose and Michael, both 68 years old, were living an even more desperate situation. Michael had lost a leg in a work accident years before, and Rose suffered from advanced diabetes. Their medications cost more than they received from Social Security. They literally had to choose between eating or getting their medicine. Rose reached the point of trying to sell her own hair to buy insulin. Their daughter, who lived in another state, couldn't help financially. The neighbors, as poor as they were, did what they could, but it wasn't enough. Michael even talked about giving up on everything. But Rose, even though weakened, had an inner strength that wouldn't be extinguished. She started making small sweets with the few ingredients she could get, selling them door to door in a borrowed wheelchair. What happened next will deeply move you. A local social media page shared their story. Within 48 hours, more than 50,000 people had seen the post. Donations started pouring in from across the country. But the real miracle wasn't just the financial resources. It was the support network that formed. Doctors volunteered to treat them for free. A pharmacy decided to provide medications at no cost. And a local construction company completely renovated the house where they lived. Let's now go to a rural area, where Anthony and Lucy, 74 years old, faced an even crueler reality. Anthony had developed Alzheimer's, and Lucy, at 71, was his only caregiver. Without resources for adequate treatment, she watched her husband of 52 years slowly disappear day by day. Medical appointments cost a fortune. Medications were unaffordable, and Lucy was physically and emotionally exhausted. She reached the point where she couldn't leave the house anymore, as Anthony couldn't be left alone even for 5 minutes. Isolated, without help, watching her own strength drain away, Lucy wrote a letter to a local radio station, not asking for money, but just venting her pain. The letter was read on air and touched thousands of people. The miracle here came in the form of community. Neighbors organized to create a care network. Nursing students started making regular visits as part of their internships. A retired neurologist offered to follow the case for free. But the most impressive thing was when the community itself created a permanent fund for similar cases, ensuring that no elderly person in that region would go through this alone again. Let me tell you about Severino and Francis, 69 and 67 years old, who lived through one of the most touching situations I've ever encountered. Married for 45 years, they were always simple, honest, hard-working people. Severino worked as a construction worker his entire life, Francis as a housekeeper. They never had much, but they were always content with each other, until both of their health began to fail simultaneously. Severino developed heart problems that required urgent surgery. Francis discovered cancer that demanded immediate treatment. Without health insurance, without resources, without family who could help substantially, they found themselves facing an impossible choice. Which of the two would be treated first, knowing there might not be resources to treat the second? The anguish was indescribable. Severino insisted that Francis be treated first. She insisted the opposite. Both were willing to give up their own lives for the other. It was then that a nurse at the public hospital, moved by the situation, decided to act. She not only mobilized the entire medical team to prioritize both cases, but created an internal campaign that spread throughout the city. The result was extraordinary. Not only did they manage to get resources for both treatments, but they also created a precedent in the hospital for similar cases. Severino was successfully operated on. Francis beat cancer, and today, at 71 and 69, they are active volunteers at the same hospital where they were saved, helping other elderly couples in similar situations. Now I want to introduce you to Mrs. Carmen and Mr. Edward, 73 and 76 years old. Their story marked me deeply because it shows how dignity can be preserved even in the most adverse circumstances. Edward had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years. Carmen was a seamstress. Cultured, educated people who always lived simply but with dignity. When Edward developed Parkinson's and Carmen had a stroke that affected her mobility, they found themselves unable to maintain their activities. The teacher's pension barely covered Edward's medications. Carmen could no longer sew. Slowly, they sold all their belongings to survive. Books, furniture, clothes, even Carmen's wedding ring was sold to buy food. The most painful moment was when Edward, in a moment of clarity between Parkinson's tremors, said to Carmen, "I'm sorry I can't take care of you anymore." Carmen, even with the stroke's after effect, replied, "We've always been a team, Edward. We'll continue to be until the end." It was this phrase that a neighbor heard and decided to share on social media. The story went viral impressively. But what moves me most is that people didn't just send money. They sent care, dignity back. Someone returned a ring identical to the one Carmen had sold. Others sent books to Edward. A local publisher offered him to record audiobooks, paying for each recording. They not only recovered financial stability but found a new reason to live. Edward recording stories for children, Carmen teaching basic sewing to young people in the community, both proving that age doesn't define a person's worth. I want to tell you about Zelda and Manuel, 70 and 72 years old, who taught me about resilience. Manuel had lost his sight due to poorly controlled diabetes. Zelda suffered from severe arthritis that drastically limited her movements. Together, they could barely perform basic daily tasks. Bathing, preparing food, shopping, everything had become a monumental challenge. They lived in a simple little house that was literally falling apart. The roof leaked. The electricity was precarious. The bathroom didn't work properly. On rainy days, they placed buckets throughout the house to catch the water. Zelda reached the point of crying, not from physical pain, but from the humiliation of not being able to keep the house clean and dignified. The miracle came through a social project from a local university. Architecture, engineering, and social work students adopted the case as an extension project. In 6 months, they not only completely renovated the house, but created specific adaptations for each person's limitations. Support bars, ramps, non-slip flooring, sound system to help Manuel navigate. But the most impressive thing was the continuous support system they created. Students make weekly visits, not just to check if everything is okay, but to chat, play adapted card games, listen to the couple's life stories. Zelda and Manuel became surrogate grandparents to dozens of college students. Let me tell you about the couple that impacted me most, Helen and Joseph, 68 and 71 years old. Joseph had been a bus driver for 35 years. Helen worked at a school as a lunch lady. Hard-working, honest people who raised 3 children with lots of love and few resources. When they retired, they thought they could finally rest a little. But life had other plans. Joseph developed aggressive cancer that required expensive and continuous treatment. Helen had to stop working to care for him. The children, now adults, had their own financial difficulties and couldn't help substantially. Slowly, they consumed all their savings. The most painful moment was when Joseph said to Helen, "Maybe it's better if I stopped treatment. That way you won't end up broke because of me." Helen looked into his eyes and replied, "Joseph, we promised in church 47 years ago, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. I'm not breaking that promise now." It was this conversation that a hospital nurse overheard and couldn't forget. She decided to create an online fundraiser to help the couple. But what happened next exceeded all expectations. The story spread, reached local media, and dozens of people started visiting Joseph in the hospital. The real miracle wasn't just the money raised for treatment. It was discovering that Joseph, during his 35 years as a driver, had helped hundreds of people silently. Children he let get off one stop early to save on fare. Elderly people he helped with their bags, people he consoled on difficult days during trips. All these people appeared to return the kindness. Joseph not only beat cancer, but discovered the positive impact his life had made on so many other lives. Today, he's a volunteer speaker, telling his story to show that kindness always comes back multiplied. The last story I want to share is about Walter and Nancy, 74 and 69 years old. They taught me that miracles can come in the most unexpected forms. Walter had been a farmer his entire life. Nancy took care of the house and helped with the crops. Simple people who never asked much from life, just enough to live with dignity. When both of their health began to fail and they could no longer work the land, they found themselves without a source of income. The rural social security was insufficient for basic needs. They reached the point of eating only one meal a day, and even then, sharing the portion between the two. Nancy was ashamed to ask neighbors for help, who were also simple farmers with their own difficulties. Walter, a man of few words, carried the silent guilt of no longer being able to provide for his wife. The situation was desperate, but they maintained dignity and mutual love above all. The miracle came through a young agronomist who visited the region and was impressed with the couple's traditional knowledge about sustainable agriculture. He realized that Walter and Nancy possessed decades of wisdom about planting, harvesting, soil conservation techniques that were being lost over time. He proposed something revolutionary: transform Walter and Nancy into traditional agriculture consultants. He created a project where they taught their techniques to young farmers, receiving payment for each consultation. But more than that, he created a program documenting traditional knowledge where the couple was paid to share their wisdom. Within a year, they not only recovered financial stability, but became regional references in sustainable agriculture. Walter, who previously felt useless, discovered that his knowledge was precious. Nancy, who thought she had nothing more to offer the world, became a mentor to dozens of female farmers. What all these stories teach us is deeply transformative. They show us that miracles are unsupernatural events that fall from the sky. They reborn when human compassion meets real need. They reborn when someone decides they could simply pass by a situation of injustice without doing something. Each of these couples faced what many would consider the end of the line. Moments where everything seemed lost, where dignity was being shattered, where love was tested to its most extreme limits. But in each case, what made the difference wasn't just the money or material resources that arrived. What really transformed these lives was the restoration of hope, dignity, the feeling of belonging to the human community. It was the rediscovery that every life has immeasurable value, regardless of age, financial condition, or physical limitations. These stories challenge us to look differently at the elderly around us. That neighbor couple we rarely see, those elderly people at the bus stop, in the bank line, at the supermarket. How many stories of struggle and dignity are hidden behind those faces, marked by time? More importantly, what can we do? How can we be instruments of miracle in someone's life? It doesn't need to be something grand. Sometimes a miracle begins with a conversation, a smile, a gesture of genuine interest in someone's story. If this message touched your heart, if you were moved by any of these stories, maybe it's time to act. Look for local organizations that work with the elderly. Volunteer at nursing homes or senior centers. Participate in community social projects. Or simply, the next time you encounter an elderly person needing help, don't pass by unnoticed. Leave in the comments. Have you witnessed or participated in a similar miracle? Do you know any elderly person who needs support? Let's use this space to create a real solidarity network. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that restore our faith in humanity. Like this video if it touched your heart, and share it so more people can be inspired and, who knows, become instruments of miracle in someone's life. Remember, you could be the miracle someone is waiting for. The question is, are you willing to be?